Okay, so my name is Eszter and I'm a theatre maker, and today I'm also an artist. And yeah, so I have a background in theatre, and I've been working also with Helium in a hospital setting since 2011, I think, on different projects. Yeah, do I have to say more? No.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Eszter. My name is Aideen Barry. I'm a visual artist. I am not one of the artists involved in this project, so I came about this by chance. Avril and Helium invited me to say a few words at Eszter's and Rachel's launch in Galway 2 months ago now, and I was very taken by the project, and I must have said a good few words because I was invited to come back here again today. I am very interested as an artist about how art permeates life and how art sits in life, and in particular this idea of how art sits in a space of convalescence. In this particular project, I found I was really taken by that notion. So, and the success of this really interesting social engaged project initiated by Helium and with these excellent artists. So that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Emma Curtis. I'm a paediatrician in the Children's Hospital in Tala, and I also work part-time as medical director to the New Children's Hospital project, and I've done that over the last 7 or 8 years. And over that time we've had quite a lot of engagement with Helium and other interested stakeholders in relation to making sure that both in terms of the design, that we really think about art and health and its impact on children and young people in particular, and that we integrate that into the design, and also that we think about art and health within the hospital itself from an operational viewpoint when we open up. And so I was involved some years ago in a discussion, a really interesting meeting that Helium held, and I was asked to come again today, so I must have behaved myself as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there, how are you doing? My name's Marie Brett. I'm like Aideen. I would be an artist that isn't directly involved in the Cloudlands project. I'm doing some professional development and mentoring with Rachel, which is how I find myself here. A little bit about me. I'm a visual artist. I use mainly film and photography and sculpture, and I make work that some people would say is around the area of trauma, and I very much invite collaboration and people to work with me in the making of work.
Rachel's a bit of a diva. I saw you. I'm Rachel Tynan, and I'm an artist on the Cloudlands project, and I've been artist in residence in Temple Street in the Children's Hospital for the last 3 years. My background is also in education, so I work with teenagers who are at risk of early school leaving. And then I think in terms of this project, this is the sort of the exciting part, is that this is the result of 3 years, but also I'm working on a new project with Helium called the Fireflies Project, which is about teenagers, looking specifically at teenagers who are transitioning from paediatric to adult care, which is how Maria and I have been involved together.
Okay. Great, and because I didn't get a chance a minute ago to introduce myself, my name is Annette Maloney, and I'm a curator and collaborator. I'd say so it's quite socially engaged as well in the area of research that I do. I've looked at the link between contemporary art and sport projects, looking at endurance and resilience, and I've had a strong interest in the area of arts and health for a number of years. I'm also a part-time advisor on the Percent for Art scheme, which is connected to capture projects in Ireland, including hospitals. So it's quite an exciting area to work in. So if we can move on then in terms of the artist description of the projects that we're going to get to see. We've got visual installations, and we've got 2 different types of artists with a theatre background and visual art and education background. So if we can get a description maybe from you first, Rachel, in terms of if we had to leave straight after the talk, what's in the room downstairs and what are people going to get a chance to see and experience?
So the project that we are working on is Titans. So this is one of the Titans. They came about with a teenager that I was working with for quite a long time, about 2.5 years, and we were working with small like Russian dolls. We decided that we would create a much larger installation piece. So there's basically 3 families of Titans, so sort of 3 sets. So you have a large one, a medium one, and a small one in each. And then there's a plinth, so you can move the Titans onto the plinth, and when the Titans are on the plinth, it sets off a series of sensors, and you'll hear the teenagers telling their story. So there's 3 different stories, and then if you open up each one of the Titans, inside you'll see different pieces relating to the story that's being told. And there's lots of different types of wood and different pieces created by the teenagers. We brought just one of them up just to give people an idea for when, just in terms of visual idea, rather than trying to think of a lot of people still think we're talking about quite small ones, whereas they're quite large.
To pass them around?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you might pass this one. This is just one that we brought. This is one story, which is about a fawn, about a girl who transforms at night time into a fawn. And it's a beautiful piece that we worked on for quite a long time with one of the teenagers, where she was having quite a hard time and she kept saying, oh, I wish I could escape. And okay, this is a story, but imagine if it was real. So we brought a makeup artist over from London and we transformed the girl into a fawn, and we did a whole photo shoot down in the multi-sensory room in the basement of Temple Street. So that's the image actually that you'll see that's going around in the base of the Titan. And then also if you just smell, this wood is cedar wood, so there's 3 different types of wood, and the cedar is just beautiful, the smell is amazing. And they're incredibly soft. You think they're going to be quite hard, but they're actually all of the wood is quite soft, and people always say you want to touch them as soon as you see them. So that's it, like the Titans. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then there is radio silence, and if you go downstairs, then mainly what you will see is a phone number, because radio silence is, I call it a radio game, because I'm not so sure what the genre is, but it's a radio show that then becomes a game, and it's an interactive radio game for this reason, that invites you to participate. And so downstairs you'll find a number that you can ring to kind of access this game, which is kind of your way of getting into it as the audience in the gallery. The teenagers in the hospital get a flyer with the same number, or it can also be broadcast on the radio, and then you will find out the number through the radio. So there's many ways of accessing this piece, because I kind of started from this point of, okay, I'm in a hospital and I'm a theatre maker and I'm working with people in isolations, and how is that going to work? Because there's many things missing for making theatre. And I don't necessarily have to make theatre, but I was kind of interested in what to do. And then I noticed, okay, there is a radio station, there's no internet, so how we go from there? And then it kind of developed into this technology, which is essentially a very elaborate answering machine that brings you on a journey to save the world, because that's what you're doing. There's 2, it's the radio show with 2 radio presenters who are hospital radio presenters who find themselves having to save the world from a silent virus that is taking over the hospital, and their only hope is a teenager. And when your only hope is a teenager, you're not in a very good position, actually. And so then they find someone else who can help, and someone else who can help is you. And then the kind of story goes from there. Once you dial in and you try to convince a teenager to save the world, and you should do it when you get a chance. It takes half an hour to save the world, and I worked with many teenagers on this, and it kind of comes from their different stories kind of woven together by me. And by them at a certain moment, because I worked in CUH, and CUH is quite an acute hospital, so that you have people coming in and out a lot, which is good, because if they go home, it makes collaboration very specific. And so it's been developed out of, I don't know, 30 stories or something. And so it's kind of a wave of all of them into one kind of crazy adventure about silence. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Which brings us nicely on to when we surveyed when we had a look at the questions that came back from the artists and the panellists in terms of the entry points into Cloudlands as a project, there were three main themes that came up. The first was collaboration, even in terms of, I know that there was a difference between the length of time that Eszter got a chance to collaborate with the teenagers versus Rachel, which there's lots of different reasons for that, and they might be able to talk to us about that in a second. The next entry point was the context in terms of how important was the hospital setting right through to the environment that the artists and the teenagers were in terms of how that got stitched into the work. And the third one was the resource of time in terms of making work like this. They're the three entry points we're going to start with. And then you tell us there's other entry points we should be considering, hopefully. So even just to follow on from Eszter's points there, Eszter, you had a very different time slot in terms of how you got a chance to work with teenagers. If you could talk about that briefly, and then we'll move on to Rachel. Please.
Yeah, so I was in the hospital for 15 days altogether. Well, okay, 15 days in the third year, and also the same in the first year, and in the second year I was assisting to the project somehow, so 15 days is probably not accurate in this way. But anyway, it's not a lot of time. And then also because people were coming and going, I would usually meet everyone once. And these are teenagers, and once it probably means somewhere between an hour and like 4 hours in terms of time span of what we might have to develop a project, which is not a huge amount of time. And so that meant that I kind of had to figure out ways of daisy chaining, of figuring out how to kind of bring something that we worked on with one teenager and kind of offering it to the next person that I'm working with, and keep referring to this aim that we have, that we are making something all together, which actually worked quite well. So there was always this understanding that in the end we are going to end up somewhere public, because we were working with radio, probably somewhere public on the radio, but that there is like this aim that goes beyond the hospital, that we are not just here for 2 hours, for 1 hour, and we'll never see each other. So it was the buy-in. And then also I just was trying to always pick things out and try to offer them to the next person, but it doesn't always work. And so I was told that we would do something else sometimes, and then it went its own way.
Because it's an interesting way of describing that creative daisy chaining, or leapfrogging ideas was the other description you had of it as well. And I presume that there was an opt-out for teenagers. I mean, a lot of that as well is about the way you approach the person and the condition they're in at any given time.
Yeah, I mean,
how did you deal with that?
Well, like, yeah, so this kind of, it's the best part, and not necessarily when, like, because I'm going to people's beds, and like most of, like, I don't know how I would find it if someone came to my bed when I was lying there and went, do you want to do some art? And you always have to remember that that's what you're doing, and so it's totally okay if someone says no, because I'm also the only person that they can say no to in this situation, because they can't say no to the doctor that wants to do something, or even they can't really say no to their parents when they want to do something, or the aunt that comes in and really wants to give them chocolate. I mean, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you kind of can't hide, and so then if I'm the one that they say no to, it's great. But at the same time, you also figure out how to go back, or how to kind of negotiate these little relationships, even if it's not so much time, but I might go and just say, okay, you don't have to do art with me, but how are you today? And then the next day we might be able to do something. So there is kind of like trust things there as well, because you are so vulnerable, and especially when you're a teenager, like the last thing you want is people, you know, staring at you in your pajamas. But at the same time, it's amazing how generous they are and how amazing work you can develop with people in their pajamas. Yeah, so.
Great. And Rachel, can I ask you then, in terms of how important the relationships are with the participants, in terms when it comes to making collaborative work, from your experience, because your time span that you got a chance to engage with and collaborate with teenagers was quite different and had different challenges, I presume, testers.
So I was working in Temple Street over 3 years, and I was there pretty much 1 day a week from say October until June, the middle of July. So I met a lot of the same teenagers and was working with the same teenagers again and again. So I think that sense of trust is really important when you meet somebody, and I think a lot of the time it's about building up trust and relationships first, and I have sort of the luxury of knowing that I will probably meet the teenager again. So I might meet someone and you might do something quite small on the first day and then you might push it the next day. But in that, there's also a sense of responsibility that if you're there on a Wednesday and the teenager knows you're in the building, you better turn up. Because if you don't turn up, good luck the following week. Or so you might turn up and somebody might not be well enough to be able to be doing anything that day, and they might just want you to hold their hand while they're getting bloods taken. And that's okay, and that's part of the whole process of building the relationships and creating that trust, so that the work that we can do can be even more exceptional, because it's the two of you working on the same platform together, rather than, I'm always very specific about saying I'm not a facilitator. It's two artists, myself and the teenager as an artist, working together, both of us on the same plane, and often neither of us would know really where we're going. And sometimes I come in with a suggestion and the teenager would say, oh no, I've been planning this for a week, this is what we're doing. And that's great, and that's exactly how it should be in the sense of true collaboration.
Great. And Marie, can I come to you then? As an artist, you've led a number of projects that involve collaboration with individuals and institutions in the area of health, as well as illness and death experience. So can you talk briefly then in terms of similarities and perhaps the differences between the work of Cloudlands?
Yeah, I'll try.
No pressure.
I suppose the biggest thing that I noticed, talking to Rachel and finding out more about Eszter's work as well, was that my work kind of maybe starts often in a hospital or some kind of a health setting or a care setting, but then it tends to spread out from there. And I seek that. And whereas Cloudlands, as I understand it, is very much anchored and held very carefully and tightly within the hospital. I start perhaps there and then spread out into, it might be people's homes, it might be loads of different settings. So I suppose that's one of the big differences in a way. I think what you've both said, similarities in terms of time and trust and risk. We'll probably come back to that a little bit, but I suppose the biggest difference is that I filter out into different places that can't be named at the beginning. Sorry,
that's okay. Emma, can I ask you then, in terms of what you're here describing then, in terms of that collaborative approach and that sense of trust and time, differences, similarities in terms of how that might relate to a healthcare professional?
I suppose that sense is interesting, and one of the parts about the art in health and having a participatory arts programme is it's very much an equal relationship between the health professionals and the artists. And while both of us have an objective to work with and enhance the experience of the child or young person, the family, and to help them get better and to try and help them feel better during the process of getting better. The really important piece is, I suppose, that we're all part of a team. And there's lots of us on the team, there's lots and lots of health professionals, but I think the Cloudlands project really shows how important the role of the artist is as part of that multidisciplinary team. And so while we don't necessarily work together, we're all working with the same objective, to enhance the well-being of the child and young person, to enhance their resilience, to improve their experience, to try and lessen, I suppose, the fear and anxiety and stress of being sick and being in hospital and having no control and having things done to you. And while appreciating that it is for your benefit, still that lack of control is terrible. And hearing the description of the projects and the control that the young people have is really good. So it's really the collaboration for us is having artists as part of that multidisciplinary team working for the benefit of the child and young person.
Aideen, can I come to you then in terms of your experience in terms of working in a socially engaged way, and I suppose similarities and differences as well in terms of the risk that's involved in that? It might be the easiest territory to find yourself in, or to build yourself, build a place for you in terms of that way, and the link then between that type of work and public engagement.
I suppose maybe just to clarify that I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as a social engaged practitioner, but I suppose I am also interested in where the conversation of where art lies, and I began the conversation about this idea of where art lives, and following on from what Emma just spoke about, that relationship of the artist as a team member. I would be very keen to hear more about that, actually. And in particular, like William Shakespeare said, that art's role is to hold a mirror up to life and reflect it back. And what I found really moving about this work was how the artists had created a very safe space where their collaborators or their contributors were able or felt safe to be able to hold a lens up or a reflective mirror up to very volatile situations, for example. And for me as a practitioner, I'm very interested in that. I suppose Rachel's piece in particular, like Ovid's poem, The Metamorphosis. This character, this faun, was going to evolve, or proposes to evolve, growing antlers and shedding them. And my understanding is that this was influenced by a young person who was awaiting a transplant and was about to either shed their old organ and maybe get a new organ. And when I was reading more about that idea, that was an incredibly tender moment for a young person to open up about the fears and anxieties of living in that situation, of being aware of their own mortality at such a young age. And it's a real gift for an artist to be able to allow a person to speak in a visual means about something that's very moving. And I suppose that's what I'm very drawn to as an artist, is that lightning rod to the human condition. I also spoke to Eszter before about, I spent a year in CUH as a child. I had meningitis and I was in a coma for a long time, and so I was very much aware of the radio station became such a huge part of my life down there. I was saying a really embarrassing story at the last opening that my dad came along, used to play the Bartman track every Saturday. But I knew what an important role the radio station was as a kind of a distraction, or to be able to talk about, like the boredom of being stuck in the same place, or being in quarantine, or, not being able to move about, and again, aware of your own mortality and what a volatile situation we are on this mortal coil, at such a young age. And I thought also another thing that my dad used to bring into me was these fighting fantasy books, where you choose an alternative ending. So you are the protagonist in the book. It's all about you and that space between you and the character. You're choosing where your destiny is from each page. And I think Eszter really totally nailed that with her project, because it was, again, about the protagonist is talking about this person who's in a volatile situation. You really nailed that sensitive situation. Anyway, sorry, I know I'm going mad off track here, so...
That's why you're back on the You've got another 40 minutes, lady. Can I just continue that then, I suppose, in terms of that risk that you take, in terms of building that trust? The one thing that struck me in terms of the threads on collaboration and the context, and it's mainly supposed to do with the time involved as well. I think for me there's also around the characteristics of how you work and a sense of manners as well. And I'm curious about whether that's something that may have been or may not have been part of your training. Is it something you have? Is it something you develop? Is it something you learn through trial and error? And while I'm landing that with you for a moment, I came across a very interesting article today by a woman called Becky Carlson, who's a women's rugby coach in the States. A LinkedIn article, and it's an open letter to the type of athlete that she is not hiring. And a lot of it came down to manners. She was saying that it's really beautifully written, that she would override, she would downgrade talent over a proper team player. And just her observations of team players who spend their time on the bench on their phone and send her 2-line emails saying, "Are you giving out any scholarships?" Which is followed up quickly by their parents emailing her saying, "Oh, here's my child's resume," and just that method of working in terms of how you do what you do, which could come from the quality of your handshake right through to the risks you take as well, even in terms of how do you deal with rejection as well in terms of not now. Eszter, can we land that one on you first?
Yeah.
Please.
Manners. It's funny. Yeah, I think I never was taught. This is very funny. I was never taught manners. I was. No, like I think I work with the dramatic. This is my best way of explaining it. And I mean, we were having a conversation. He works in kind of social art projects, theatre mainly, and we were having a conversation of how do you behave with people as an artist? And he was like, "What do you mean? You just behave with people? Like there's no as an artist. Like that's a weird part of that sentence." And so and that I always think of this because it's like, yeah, it's just you just have to be there. Like you're actually there. You're not like there theoretically. You're really, because when you're writing the funding application, you kind of are just like theoretically there, and you make a plan or something. But when you're actually there, then you just kind of have to behave like you would as a person. And I don't know. I'm sure you can get better at it, and I think you do. And I'm sure you can kind of train it. But also, it's just kind of, I don't know. It's just being yourself, I think, and not kind of being too much in this strange other head space that I guess you are as well. Like you are trying to make frames and weird other stuff that maybe people don't do when they enter a room. But at the same time, you are just, yeah, I don't know. I think
I think that's a good point about you just are. That it's something innate, I think, in those of us who work with people. That I definitely wasn't taught. It's not something I ever thought about. But I think it all just comes down to a sense of respect. And if you have a sense of respect for that person that you're working with, for the other members on the team that you're working with, then that leads you into the work that you do. I think the other point about Helium is that we're very lucky because we're very flexible. So when we're in the hospital, if we need to spend nearly a whole day working with one teenager, we can have that flexibility. And it's an amazing privilege, place to be, and an amazing place to be able to work in. And I think if you over-taught it too much, it would probably get really scary. I know from my first day in Cloudlands, I was just so terrified I was going to hurt someone, or someone was going to do something terrible. And then you become used to that environment, and yeah, I think it's probably just that sense of respect for the environment and the place that you are, and the respect for the people that you're working with. Does anyone else want to come back on manners?
Aideen, can I ask you to come in there in terms of the link between that characteristic or way of working that you develop individually, and maybe the link between, I'm aware as well, you're a third level lecturer in terms of
do that to me now.
Side of this. And then I'm going to ask Marie and Emma the same question as well.
I actually don't know even how to answer that now without, I suppose there's a lot of good things have been said here that I would totally bring back to my own students about respect and manners and boundaries, boundaries for yourself and for everybody else. But I think also, artists are becoming more respected in the profession in Ireland for the first time in a long time. And it does offer us a unique ability to hold our lens up and comment about very difficult subject matters. And in particular, say, mental health or wellness, which is such a current topic. And it's, I would like to see more programs like Helium actually established right across the board in schools and other institutions, other centres where people are in maybe possibly volatile situations. I mean, I have absolutely massive respect for Marie Brett and how she works with our senior citizens, for example, and the respect shown and the sensitivity shown to your own practitioners and our collaborators. And I suppose when speaking to my students, I would always say that. But I also believe personally myself, though I don't know if I can communicate this entirely, about altruism, that whatever you get in life you give back. And that's not coming from a spiritual place or a religious place or anything like that. I've had a very privileged life and I'm very aware of the privilege that I have. So I'm always aware that whenever I'm collaborating with people with intellectual disabilities or marginalised people, that I'm also very respectful of those circumstances. So I don't know if that went way off topic again now, but anyway, so sorry.
I suppose for me, just trying to frame it, picking up from Aideen in terms of training, and then I'll talk about my practice. It wasn't in my training as an artist, it didn't need to be as far as I was concerned. But the point of when I then wanted to work with others, in terms of making my art, I sought training on the side frame. So it's a little bit like, I suppose I sought training in community development and in teaching and in group facilitation as a priority to be able to, what I would call, connect with people in a different way. And my ask is quite demanding. I want people to kind of connect in a meaningful way and to, as you were saying really nicely there, Aideen, find a means to reveal something of great importance to them that then becomes public property through an artwork. And I don't think I necessarily have the skills to do that just person to person. I totally agree with what you were saying, Eszter, in terms of, it's within the person and it's within life. And I totally agree. I don't see it as I need to do something as an artist. Any different to if I was a scientist or anyone else on a team. I suppose in terms of the ask, so people that don't know, I would have done projects with young people in care, and I would have asked them to reflect on their experience in residential care or with bereaved parents, and other projects. So I try to be mannerly, but I try to be very clear about what my ask is. So I suppose I wouldn't use the word manners as such, but I totally get what you're saying to use it in a much broader way, I think, in terms of my reading as the expectation, the intent, the power either has within that, as well as all the means to connecting. It's a bit of a broad answer.
I suppose one of the things that we're very concerned about we have this amazing opportunity to build a new children's hospital, and we're very conscious, I suppose, of the physical infrastructure of the current hospitals and how they're old and they aren't what we're going to reproduce, which hopefully will be something very comforting, very welcoming, very comfortable for families, for children, young people and their parents, and will be, there'll be escape and distraction, and with performance space in the atrium that hopefully we'll have, drama and music, and that we will try and, this is a hospital with children from all over Ireland who will have very serious illnesses, and that we will make the experience, while the illness and perhaps the treatments are tough and challenging, that at least the experience will not be stressful and anxiety-inducing. And so we're very excited about that, and really putting a lot of effort into the design so that it meets the needs of the children and the young people and the staff who are going to be working there. But when I was thinking about this week, I was looking back over, I suppose, the materials I have in my arts and health folder on my computer, and we had a consultation day. We have a youth advisory group which is really a fantastic group of people. It's a changing group of people because they've grown up over the lifetime period of the project and left us, and new people have joined us, and they meet the architects, and they're really, they've got really clear ideas about what they think works and doesn't work, and we have a family forum, and they advise us. But we had a big consultation day in Dublin Castle a number of years ago now, and we had 8 to 12-year-olds and 12 to 18-year-olds, and I was looking back over the notes, and there was a brainstorming session, and they were asking in different groups, they were asking people to say what was good and what was bad about the current children's hospitals. And interestingly, all of the things that were good were people related. So it wasn't really you could say, well, the infrastructure is not great, and hopefully some of the good things in the future will be the building and the design and the experience. But we were talking about manners, and so actually what was important was being included, being treated with respect, being made to laugh, being made to feel comfortable, being made to feel safe, trusting the people who were looking after them. And so all of the good things were actually about people. And I think it's about, and we do, while we do teach our medical students to be polite, we don't take it as a given that they will be. We do teach them how to break bad news. We teach them how to, talk to parents, and we look at the way when we're training junior doctors, we look at the way they interact with small children and with older children and adolescents, and so we're very conscious that this is not something that's a given, that they will be good with children and young people, because some of the things that were bad were also to do with people, and being talked over in front of you, talking about me in front of me rather than with me, and but also a lot of the bad things were infrastructural. It was sharing. We're going to have individual patient rooms, which are en suite. So there's only one bathroom on the ward, and it's difficult to access it in a wheelchair, and my mum has to sleep on the floor. So a lot of the bad things were infrastructural, and that's what we're going to address. But actually, that won't be enough. We've got to keep the good. We've got to keep the people good, and that's where the manners comes in, and respect, and being on a journey together, and collaboration. I often think, as a paediatrician, you're very much in collaboration with the parents. Both of you are sharing the care of the child, and then as the child gets older, you're in collaboration with the young person. And I know your new project now is about transition to adult care, and part of our role is allowing the young person to assume the adult role in their care. So it's very exciting that we will improve the built environment and the design and the art feel in it, but we've got to keep working on the good people piece as well.
Thank you for that. And I mean, it'll always come down to that one in terms of that balance and expectations as well, and what's possible in any given hour you have with somebody, or month, or 7 or 8 years of a project. We can come back to the panel as well, just in terms of the link between the context and how that influences the project and the resource of time. But in terms of time, I'm aware as well we should be going downstairs in the next 10 to 15 minutes. I think it might be an opportunity to open it out to the floor. You've taken the effort to come here earlier than the opening itself, so if anybody has any comments and questions that they want to come in with.
Hi, I'm Hilary, I'm the Director of Artbox. I was just wondering, for everyone on the panel, how do you feel the gallery space functions in this type of setup? What does it bring to it? Does it add anything else? Is it so superficial that it's just a visual outpost? Or can it more deeply engage itself in this kind of therapeutics?
Good question. Just quickly before I pass that on. I think in terms of the teenagers' perspective, one of the big things they talk about is going beyond the walls of the hospital. That they can create work and it can be held within the hospital, but for them, they're stuck within the hospital, so they want their stories to go beyond that. So we'd often be posting things to places and sending things out, and I think especially something like the national tour really validates the work that they've done. So not only is it going beyond the walls of the hospital and being in a gallery space, but it's going on beyond the walls of the hospital and going to all these different cities, and especially for the teenagers in Temple Street who live all over the country. It means that sometimes it's their exhibition and their work is being seen by the first time from family and friends, because it's, you know, you live somewhere remote and suddenly it's accessible for them because we've been to Galway and Cork and Waterford. So, does anybody else want to?
Eszter, maybe. Yeah, I think it's what Rachel is saying. Like, there is something that you just can't do inside of the hospital because you have the time limits and because you're jumping around the doctor. Like, it's a very it's a very tricky environment to make art in at the best of times, and then there's many other things that are happening, and so you get to a point where you're happy, but okay, you had a nice afternoon. But when you have this opportunity that people will be, you know, that we're putting the work, like, okay, it's not just a nice afternoon, we're taking this actually seriously. We're going to bring it to a professional gallery and it's going to be there, and it's not going to take any excuses. It's not going to be, oh, but isn't that lovely? They made it in half an hour. And so we're not, because that's what happens sometimes. And so you can go to a teenager and you can offer this, that actually, okay, so we're in the hospital, but actually, that's not why I'm here. Like, you're ill, but actually the reason why I want to work with you is not really that. And where this is going is also somewhere beyond that. So that we can kind of ignore the hospital for a while, which is actually what we're trying to do, and that's where kind of aiming high comes in, and having the gallery is where aiming high arrives, I guess. And having a national tour, you know, like, yeah, taking it seriously, I guess, from the beginning, and kind of going, yeah, we're gonna make work in this way, but we are gonna make work, and not just me, but also the teenager, because then it's something else also.
I think for me, seeing it in the gallery context, it really, normally when you put on a show, you know, a lot of the work kind of ends at the gallery space. You know, it kind of dissociates itself a little bit from its maker. It becomes kind of just an object in the space that people can look at and engage with if they choose to. Whereas I find in this project, what's wonderful is that the works remain very well tethered to their makers. And there is this type of leapfrogging out of the gallery space as well onto kind of the furthermost reaches of what is possible in terms of health and education and health and arts, and the linkages there and that are possible. That will probably become more possible with the development of the children's hospital. Sounds amazing. So I think for the first time that we really activated the gallery here, you know, and contextualizing here is a big help. So yeah, I think so.
Just a little bit to what you just said there. What I'm struck by is when a child is in the hospital and they lose control, having the medium of arts and something creative like this to bring back out into the community is wonderful, because they're trapped, but then suddenly everybody sees, well, I haven't really lost my social standing in my community. I miss my buddies, I miss school, and my family, and look, that's going to be down at the town hall. So I still exist, even though an awful lot has been taken from me. And the value of what I've done in that transition, everybody can see. So I think it's marvellous. It lasts, and you should do it over and over.
Two really quick things in response to that. One, yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing it does is it often gives the teenager something else to communicate about. So instead of the granny coming in and wanting to talk about how you've been sick, the granny is coming in and saying, well, what have you been doing? And we sometimes send, you know, work home to teenagers, so we might post stuff. So it's a constant sort of conversation, and that ability to be able to communicate and that sort of autonomy around the project, I think, is really important. The other thing, just in terms of existing, is that even when teenagers, you know, aren't with us anymore, if they have passed away, their work is often still embedded in the project, if the families want. And I think that's really important in terms of remaining part of the project and part of the life of the project. Thank you.
My name is Maloney. I'm just started working in Temple Street Hospital this week as a condition coordinator, so I find it's really interesting in terms of the future prospects that might be there for projects that are coming down the line. And I suppose I wanted to find out about the challenges that you had in getting teams to engage, because I know often it's very difficult to keep interest on board and to get people to buy in, and then also as well how you would consider about not only about the patients and the young people that are in bed and in hospital who are actively unwell, but those who are living with chronic illness and well and trying to keep well and living at home, and how you would access arts to that group.
Can we see that one?
Yeah, no, I can start. You can say more.
What are the eyes?
It's just like, yeah. In terms of engaging, I had to kind of get good at that, because I wouldn't have kind of teenagers that I would work with all the time, so I had to engage a lot, always with new people, and it starts with a lot of talking. And not really, like, I arrive and I'm very clear about who I am and what I'm kind of there to do, and I don't kind of shy away from calling myself an artist and all that. But after that, there's quite a bit of chatting, just about stuff, and then we have like things. They're not tricks, this is the worst word, but like in the first year we had a box or boxes with things inside that were kind of curious enough to start conversation, but vague enough to like not define it, because that was actually the trick, is that we would come with something that makes it feel like there is a framework or there is something, but not too much so that it feels like a task. So then it's like this negotiation between like, okay, I have a box with a feather inside, Rachel's box, anyway, and that can be whatever, but there is a kind of solid starting point. And then, I don't know, the third year I ended up with games, because it was just a very good way of kind of getting through a lot of coolness issues, because we're talking about teenagers, and so you have to kind of arrive to a certain level before that they will want to do anything with you. And so I found that making games, coming up with games, was a really good way of telling stories, because I could do it in another way, and then we would arrive with a story that we were both happy with, a story or whatever. We would end up with a thing, often a game. Game interpreted in many ways, but it was just a kind of shortcut for me in this particular case.
Yeah, I think in terms of engaging them at the beginning, I'm always amazed at how open teenagers are to being involved in a project like this, because they're asked so much. I think one thing that really helps is often the play specialists who would know the teenagers quite well might introduce me the first time, and that breaks that initial, this is a stranger arriving at the end of your bed. I think also the boxes, we used to have the boxes like wrapped up like presents, and you just put them out and you'd say, do you want to have a chat about one of these? Do you want to open? And they, immediately it looks like a present, so no one's going to say no. So they'd open it, and then they take something out, and then suddenly, you're not putting any pressure on them about you have to create something. It's just a conversation that starts. And I think in terms of supporting them when they go home, we do that as much as we possibly can, and at the same time, there's only a couple of us, and there's only so much funding. So there's an absolutely unlimited amount of projects that we could do, but in terms of focusing specifically at the moment, it's been important for us to work with the teenagers who are chronically ill and long-stay patients. A lot of them, when they do go home, they will, a lot of teenagers that I would work with long-term would get parcels, and you still connect. One of the teenagers has already transitioned to adult care, and we've been very lucky that I've been able to travel and visit her, so that she's been almost in a more mentor sort of evaluation role now, that she, I sort of test things on her. I'll send her something and I'll say, what do you think? And she'll come back and say, no, I don't know what you're on. Or she might come back and say, yeah, that's great, let's try it this way. but absolutely, I think how you support, especially as teenagers, they often go home and you won't go back to school for, you know, a couple of weeks or a couple of months. So I think that sort of in-between period definitely needs to be looked at some stage.
And just to say on that, Helium has another program called Juicy Places, which is it's a film project for teenagers with chronic illness, and that's community based. So I'll just tell you about that afterwards as well.
Thank you. I am here to a very old friend of Rachel. I also happen to have lived in Temple Street over the majority of the last 3 years when Helium was in place. And just a comment firstly, as a healthcare professional, when your role is often to establish a relationship with very unwell teenagers and older children, often they do put up barriers to you because you go in as someone who's trying to take care of them and help them, and yet you're doing things they don't like, putting in lines, taking bloods off them, doing procedures and examining them. Even the process of examining a child or a teenager can be very uncomfortable and distressing for them, whereas for us we would see it as almost routine. And I think something that I saw which really opened my eyes during the Helium project was the sense of identity that it gave, as well as control. It gave them a real sense of identity and an ability to explore themselves in what is a very unnatural and surreal scenario that no one expects to find themselves into. And a hidden aspect of this project would be very interesting to see it in the gallery. But what I found is when you know these teenagers and young people for such a long time, to actually see their work up even in the hospital, it gives you a real insight into people who may not show that side of themselves to you to maintain the control that they have, but that they'll show to people like Rachel, and it's really touching, and I think it's a really important part of the care, the overall care that they get in the hospital, and something that I'd love to see continued and brought through. I really am interested in transition, and I think giving that opportunity to express themselves in such a difficult phase is fantastic. So well done.
Anybody else want to come in on that?
I might just say, in terms of that sort of goes back to that idea of being in a really privileged space, and we were talking about there earlier, that often what the teenager and I, what we create together is sometimes the only, you might be the only person they're actually letting in terms of that conversation. And it's often, you need to be very careful, even if it's creating work, that we're creating work, but some of that work will be seen and some of it won't be seen, and that's okay, because sometimes they're creating pieces that they don't want to be seen, and that is about them and about their identity and about them working through what they're going through in their experiences and their stories. Do you want to?
Anybody else want to?
Yeah.
Just to follow on a little bit, and I think what your question in terms of about the gallery, because we're about to go back down to the gallery, and maybe that touches it really in the sense of some of it's public and some of it's private, but it's artwork, and so a gallery would be a natural environment to show an artwork at its best, in terms of being able to take space and to step back and do all the things that galleries can do for an artwork. But then maybe there are, like you were saying yourself, in terms of when the work's located in different contexts, like the hospital, or potentially other spaces, then other things happen as well in those spaces. So I just think that's an important question.
I think we will head downstairs, and we would like to really, really thank you for taking the extra time and being with us here today. Thank you very much, and to the panelists as well for your time. Thank you.